It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. I know the anxiety that comes with watching a loved one struggle with a nonlinear path. This podcast was created to fight back against the narrow picture of success painted by social media. Each week we share authentic stories from people who changed course, maybe failed, and ultimately found their own definition of success. These are the stories you need to hear to prove that changing your mind is common and you don't have to have it all figured out at 18. So if you're a parent or you're a young adult looking for a little proof, you're home. Now let's get into today's episode. If you'd like to explore how I can help your young adult, you can schedule a free consultation through my website link in the show notes. Today, my guest is Madison Burke. Madison is a trained interventionist, case management specialist, and a consultant with Maxwell Recovery Services. She earned her bachelor's degree in sculpture and art therapy from Syracuse University and is a certified addiction technician, certified break-free interventionist, certified core values coach, and a RISE trained professional. Drawing from her own lived experience with substance use, trauma, chronic illness, and mental health challenges, Madison has worked across multiple roles in residential treatment, including director of admissions at a women's trauma and substance abuse center in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. She is passionate about helping women and families heal through an attachment-based whole family approach. Madison is a hoot to speak with, and honestly, I did not know her story, so having her as a guest and interviewing her and hearing her story was quite mind-blowing for me. So let's not wait any longer. Here's Madison. All right, Madison, I'm excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
So excited to be here.
I am just like over the moon to hear you talk about your story, because I feel like when we were in Austin in February, I like finally learned more about you. First of all, it was the first time that we met in person. So it was just like, that was great in itself. But then beyond that, it was like, oh, I finally learned a little bit about you, because I had no idea your backstory. And so obviously I latched onto that. Like, I need you to have it on the podcast. So I just appreciate you carving out time from your busy schedule to sit down and chat with me and tell me your story.
I'm so happy to be here. So happy to share anything. You know, it's funny when people ask me about my story, there's so many different legs that I can go down. It's like, which part is most relevant here? And so I'll just tell you what feels relevant today.
I'll prompt you with a question and then we'll go from there. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, cool. So why don't we start with when you were 18? Oftentimes, well, first of all, just tell us where you grew up, right? Like, because that just helps us conceptualize too the culture in which, or the community in which you were raised. And as you and I both know, like, depending on where you grew up, there's definitely different types of pressures that exist. So where did you grow up? And then what was the messaging that you were receiving about what you're supposed to do after high school?
Yeah. So I grew up, born and raised in Aspen, Colorado. And Aspen's a funny place to grow up because it feels a little bit like Disneyland. It's like this beautiful image. You kind of like, there's a lot of wealth. There's a lot of expectations, and people come here for a vacation. So it's a resort ski town where people come, have gobs of money to spend on a lot of things, including drugs and alcohol. And they come here, they party. And then when they go home, the next round comes in. So growing up here, we were sort of taught that this is life. This is what people do. And they went home to their normal lives, and they went home to work and school and all of that. And we stayed. And so that's sort of the context in which I developed a sense of self and identity. And, you know, my mom worked at a bank. My dad's a hammer and nails construction worker. And so there was this always sort of like living beyond my means mentality and sort of striving for the best of the best, literally in the world, without a real sense of reality.
Well, it makes me question too, like if the experience, right, the interactions that you have is like living in this Disneyland like experience where you're just like party hard, play hard all the time. This is real life, right? I imagine that it would be hard for somebody to say, hey, like to pull you out. You should go somewhere else. It's like, why would I go anywhere else when this is where I grew up? Like, why would any other place be inviting or enticing?
Well, it's funny you say that because I think for a lot of people who struggle with mental health and addiction, which I struggled with both, there's this sort of inherent sense of otherness. And I experienced that in a lot of ways during high school. You asked about sort of being 18. I mean, even leading up to that, it's like most of my peers were highly recreational, athletic individuals. They grew up in families that were that way. I was not. I was this kind of creative, quirky. I, sewed my own pants in middle school out of like Monopoly money print fabric. I was an artist and I didn't feel that I fit in. And to add on top of that, I was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic at 13. I probably lived with the disease for a year and a half or so leading up to the diagnosis. And when that happened, I just was unwilling to accept that this was my reality. Just another piece of this is what makes you different. This is other sort of entered the picture. And my teenage brain basically said, no, not doing it. And so anytime someone said you shouldn't, or you can't, or I wouldn't, I did the opposite. I said, I will. And most of my peers went to Colorado universities, CSU, CU Boulder, all of these places. And I wanted to go as far away as possible. I chose Syracuse University, not because it's got a great art program, not because it's an excellent school, but because it was pretty much as far away and as different as it gets compared to Aspen.
Yeah, for anybody that's listening, like regardless, you should just Google like Aspen and then look at kind of the community in which Syracuse is. You're right, Madison. You could not have found a more different place.
Yeah, I was craving different and craving other. And I definitely got it in a lot of really beautiful ways and in a lot of really kind of harmful ways, or I think ways that ended up being harmful to me. So,
yeah. So why don't I'm not going to open the door unless you want to like share specifics, but I always ask the kind of question of like, okay, so if you did end up going to a college, what was that college experience like? And then, I mean, this conversation really is, well, it's going to be short, right? Like before you know it, it's over, but we are building the journey or like starting to paint the path of like, how did you get from growing up in Aspen to now we know the part of the story where you went to Syracuse for several reasons. And we're leading the path towards what it is that you're doing now. But right now we're still trying to fill in those gaps. So fill us in. How is Syracuse, and lead us on the path to the work that it is that you're doing now?
Yeah. So I went to Syracuse University and, everyone told me this is a horrible climate to go to. It's wet, it's lake effect, it's freezing cold. And in my little Aspen brain, I thought, I know what snow is. Like, who are you kidding? I grew up in the mountains, and I got there and I became incredibly depressed. I was unable to get up and go to school. I was sleeping most of the day, living most of my awake hours were at night, and I dove pretty heavily into cocaine. So I was using cocaine to sort of stay awake, alert, be able to attend classes. The logical thing to do would have been to take care of my blood sugars. That's something that didn't occur to me at the time. I instead sort of use substances to be able to function. And I'm an incredibly high functioning person. So I spent a semester at Syracuse. I could not manage. I was so depressed. I came home and spent a semester back home in Old Snowmass, right near Aspen, Colorado. And then I went back to school. I, was a straight A student. I was doing art classes. I studied sculpture, totally impractical, but what I wanted to do. And my parents were probably too encouraging, in regards to following my dreams. And I had two groups of friends there, and I had one group that was my sort of like A plus, like very high functioning, like didn't touch a drug, probably still haven't their entire lives. And then I had my sort of derelict group of friends. So I had this sort of splitting of self and compartmentalization of the things that I wanted in my life and the things that were filling needs I didn't know I had. That went on for a long time. I ended up moving. There's lots of things that happened along the path of this story, but for the purpose of consolidation, I'll just give you the cliff notes. I was living in Manhattan for a little while. I was running a business. I was in the fashion industry, and I was also working at a bar. I was making lots of money from tips, and I was having drugs delivered to my house, and things sort of started to melt away. Again, one hand, living in Manhattan in your 20s, I was having the time of my life. And the other part of my time was spent in hospitals with blood sugars that should have put anyone else under, comatose, using cocaine to stay awake, to manage to run a business. And I was getting MRSA and staph infections in my face. I eventually, had to come home. But the thread that ties my story together is like this ability to function, this ability to mask and look okay when really things were coming undone internally. I moved back home. I was working in a restaurant. I had an infection in my toe that required IV antibiotics. So I was on a PICC line. I was given opiate medication to manage that pain. And I was working also like 12-hour shifts on my feet at a restaurant during that time. So my brain, this beautiful brain that I have, was able to parse out like the things that I need to do and the things that I need to ignore in order to work and have friends and function. And that's the thing that drives me through my work today, but also the thing that also killed me. So I kept doing that, and things were going pretty poorly, but I was still holding a job. And that's when my vision started to go. And this is all due to lack of management of blood sugar, plus a drug that increases blood pressure. And I remember these little blood vessels bursting in my eye. And I remember standing in my bedroom. One of my eyes I couldn't see very well out of, and the other was okay. And I saw this little blood vessel burst, and this curtain of blood sort of like came down over my eye. And I remember looking down at this crumpled pile of jeans on my floor and thinking, that's the last thing I'm ever going to see. And I'm a visual artist, right? So that's like been my passion. I do believe that artists cannot be happy unless they're creating, even if it's not what they're doing for work. And so my little sister scooped me up in her arms like a child, really carried me to the van, took me to the hospital. And from there, I lost my vision in both eyes. I was blind for a full year and was forced to essentially look at like, who am I outside of these roles? Who am I outside of running a business? Who am I outside of being the friend that comes in and saves people when they're in trouble? Who am I outside of being an artist? Like, what am I really? And this real sort of like shattering of identity that forced me to look at who I am outside of what I do or what I'm able to do. And so this fiercely independent part of me was forced to accept help. I couldn't find the bathroom in my own house without someone leading me there. And I didn't want it. I didn't want that help, but I needed it. And my body gave up before my brain ever would. Mm. That's something that I draw upon regularly in terms of how I help people today. And I know that we need to get to sort of what I'm doing, what led me to this path. But it's like this idea that our brains can logically tell us to stop doing something that's hurting us, like, is just such a fallacy.
Mm.
It really took a lot for me. I mean, you'd think. So I was blind and I regained vision in one eye. The other eye looked horrible. Again, I'm going to call back to like my days in the fashion industry in New York. I have one side of my face that where the eye is drooping down about halfway and I can't see out of it. It's painful. I'm taking opiate medication and the other half looks like me. And I remember standing in front of the mirror and covering one side of my face and saying, okay, that's the person I know, that's somebody I recognize. And then doing the same thing and peeking through the crack of my eye and looking at the other side of my face and thinking, and that's the monster. And it was like complete like imagery and like visceral, tactile metaphor of what I was doing with my life. It was like this one side of me that's so buttoned up and together, and this other side of me that's completely falling apart. And like, there it is, right on my face, right in the mirror, impossible to ignore. Yet I did.
Wow.
And that was enough. And so I remember getting my vision back. I started to teach art again, which was my great passion. I was teaching at an art institute in Aspen, and I felt like, okay, I'm finally getting my life back and this sort of like sense of relief. I didn't stop drinking. I did stop using harder substances, but I felt like, okay, like, you know, alcohol's never been a problem for me and I'm okay to do this. And I got a call from my doctor one day and they told me that I was in renal failure. And so my kidneys were failing. And that obviously, and maybe not obviously, but that sent me spiraling. So I learned to do dialysis for myself because in this small mountain town, we don't have that. So I went and learned at the University of Denver, Colorado Hospital to basically give myself dialysis. And so I was teaching at an art center that was a few minutes from my house. I would come home on a lunch break. I would take a few hours to give myself dialysis and then I would go back to work. And I went down to San Antonio to get a kidney transplant. My mom and my sister both offered me one of theirs. They were both matches. And so I was faced with this decision of like, whose organ do I take today? I ended up getting a transplant with my little sister. So she gave me one of her kidneys. And I was in this state of just complete numbness. I was still functioning. I was still working, but I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel grateful. And I was just waiting. Like, when am I going to feel something again? Mm-hmm. And I got home and I think there was this sense that, okay, this ship is sinking because like my experience tells me that when things are okay, another shoe is going to drop and I'm not going to be okay. And so I think I subconsciously felt like, well, if this ship is going down, I'm going to be the captain. I'm not going to wait and sit in this limbo, and I'm going to be the captain of this sinking ship. Like if the Titanic's going down, I'm going to be the iceberg. And I started drinking again, and I wasn't drinking heavily, but now I have a functioning kidney that's processing alcohol. So a couple of drinks for me, oh man, at altitude, give me a break. I was wasted, you know, and I got a DUI, and my family finally said to me, like, listen, like, we've been paying for your health insurance. Like, we've been going through this emotional roller coaster with you. They didn't have someone like you, Joanna, or someone like me to guide them through this. They didn't know. And they were doing the very best with what they had. But they finally just said, like, we cannot continue to invest in you when you're a bad investment, basically. And we can't continue to pay for your health insurance. And we can't continue to put ourselves through this roller coaster and this fear and this hope that maybe this time, because I'd been to treatment once. I skipped that part of the journey because like, again, time. And they said, like, we need you to be all in. Otherwise we're all out. And so I went to treatment and I didn't believe it was going to work. And I thought, I'll do what you say, and I'll do it wholeheartedly this time, because I'd been before and sort of just checked the boxes, but knew in the back of my head, like, I'm not doing this thing. And so and I was like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this the way that I am being told I should. And I'm going to give it my everything. And when I do a psychodrama, that's, you know, I'm going to swing the bat, and I'm going to swing it hard. Like, I'm going to exhaust myself from trying as hard as I can, because I hadn't really done that before. And I think there's this fear of, like, in the past, I've had all this to lean against. Like, I'm not like the top of whatever my expectations were. I'm not reaching that great potential, this incredible bar I've set for myself. But I have all these reasons why not. Like, I've been blind, like, I've like been in kidney failure. Oh, I'm using. Oh, I'm depressed. And so there are all these reasons why I wasn't achieving what I thought like my standard of achievement should be. And so I'd never really tried, I don't think, ever fully at anything. And I gave it my all, and I didn't think it was going to work. And I was wrong this treatment episode. I was very, very wrong. Thank God.
Well, and it led you to where you are now eventually. So why don't you, because I want to ask a question immediately after this. And I think it's tremendously important, because there's a component to this that actually is like we could talk probably for hours about it, but the medical side of like your medical health, right? Like you said, at 13, you found out that you're a type 1 diabetic. For somebody that has substance use and you're a diabetic, it just compounds how it, like, just your body really can be shredded. But again, we'll say that for another day. But for now, why don't you tell us, what do you do? Like, tell us who you work for, what do you do? And we'll make sure that we have the link in the show notes.
Yeah. Okay. So basically I work now for Maxwell Recovery Services. I'm a trained interventionist, and I'm trained and certified to do all different kinds of coaching for individuals and families. It looks like a whole family approach to how to get well. And I help people move along the stages of change. I have no expectations of somebody when I begin working with them. I meet them where they are, and I help them have insight that I wished I'd had when I was going through what I was going through. I help families know what to do, what to say, and also just how to help themselves and be at peace, because they're also, my parents were just miserable and devastated and confused. And so that's the very like aerial perspective of what I do today is coaching and intervention, and sort of consultation. We call it comprehensive recovery navigation. So.
Okay. And we'll make sure, again, we have the links to contact you, not just the website, but like the actual information to contact you for anybody that wants to connect. Because I think the call to action after every guest really is like kind of twofold. One, you're a human, right? Regardless of like what you're doing professionally, there is something about the human connection. So if there's a parent that's listening to this, that they're like, oh my gosh, Madison, your story is eerily similar to what my young adult is experiencing right now. Like, I could really lean on you. And again, that kind of segues into a professional capacity, but more importantly, it's about the need for the work that we do is about connection. And this podcast in general is about just acceptance of whatever vision you had for your young adult likely is shifting, because we're also talking about another human who's growing up in the world, and they're interacting, and we can't control how they live. And so anyways, call to action. Again, I'll reiterate it at the end. Here's my question. Now that you've shared your story, do you see yourself as successful?
Yes, I do. I've redefined what success looks like for me. And I think success is in every moment. I feel fulfilled. I feel happy. I feel able to balance like what I do for a living and what I do for me. And even in my failures, like I've got this ingrained and resilience that gets me through them. And so when things are hard, like I know I can take that on, and I know I can get through it. And even when it's not what I want it to look like. And that's success to me.
All right. Well, I think for the sake of time, I'm not going to ask another question. What I'm going to do is just express my gratitude to you. I mean, the fact that you are showing up how you do now, given the amount of like punches you have thrown at your body throughout the years. The one thing that I actually like really appreciate about you actually is your sense of humor. And I don't think we haven't really even like tapped into that. Like, I think you have to have a sense of humor in order to like reflect back on the damage that you did to yourself, but leading to what has become this like beautiful thing that's blossomed once you leaned into treatment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Next podcast episode, I can do my impressions and parodies of like the nurses in some of these hospitals when they saw me rolling through the door. So,
all right, next time. Well, Madison, thank you again for carving out some time, sharing your story. I'm honestly just being vulnerable, like talking about some of the things that you experienced, because, you know, what we're talking about is the messy, right? This is life. And I think, you know, in order to see the beauty through it all, we have to also like make sure that we're exposing what some of that mess looks like. And so I just appreciate you. And again, if anybody's curious to reach out, we'll make sure that we have the links for connection in the show notes. So thanks again, Madison.
Thank you, Joanna.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.